Hey guys, so welcome back. Today we'll be going over long division, but we'll be leaving all of our answers in decimal format. Remember, when you are solving long division, always remember to divide, multiply, subtract, and then you bring your number down. Okay, so divide, multiply, subtract, and then bring your number down. Our first example is 174 divided by 5. I'm going to go ahead and set up my division problem here. So 174 on the inside, and then you have your 5 on the outside. So first we're going to ask ourselves, 5 goes into 1 how many times? It does not go, it's too small, okay? So now let's try 5 goes into 17 how many times? 5 goes into 17, let's see. We have 5 times 1, 5 times 2, 5 times 3, and then 5 times 4. Let's try these numbers to see. So 5 times 1 is 5, 5 times 2 is 10, 5 times 3 is 15, and then 5 times 4 is 20. The closest number that I can choose is 5 times 3. That's the closest, largest number that I can pick. So 5 times 3, I'm going to write a 3 on top. 5 times 3 is 15. Now I'm going to subtract. 7 minus 5 is 2, and then 1 minus 1 is 0. Now I'm going to bring down my 4. 5 goes into 24 how many times? So let's finish our chart here. We have 5 times 4 is 20. Let's see 5 times 5 to see what number I get. And that's going to give me 25. So I do not want to use 5 times 5 because that's too high. But I can use 5 times 4. That's the closest, largest number that I can use. So 5 times 4, I'm going to write a 4 on top. 5 times 4 is 20. Now I'm going to subtract. 4 minus 0 is 4. And then you have 2 minus 2, that's 0. Now we ask ourselves, 5 goes into 4 how many times? It doesn't go, so now I'm going to add my decimal and my 0. I'm going to add a decimal here. I'm going to add a 0 and bring down my 0. Okay, so now that I added my decimal point and my 0, 5 goes into 40 now how many times? 8 times. So I'm going to write an 8 on top here. 5 times 8 is 40. And now I'm going to subtract. 40 minus 40 is going to be 0. So your quotient is 34.8. Let's try 435 divided by 25. I'm going to set up my division problem. 435 on the inside, 25 on the outside. So now we're going to ask ourselves, 25 goes into 4 how many times? It doesn't go, it's too small. So let's try 25 goes into 43 now how many times? The closest number that I can use, 25 times 3 is too big. I don't want to use this because that's 75. But I can do 25 times, I can't do 25 times 2. That's still too big because that's 50. I can do 25 times 1. That's 25. I can use that. So I'm going to write a 1 on top. 25 times 1 is 25. Now I'm going to subtract 43 minus 25. So 3 minus 5, I can't do that. I'm going to borrow my tens place. This 4 will become a 3. This 3 will now become a 13. So now you have 13 minus 5, that's 8. And then you have 3 minus 2, that's going to give you 1. So 43 minus 25 is 18. Now I'm going to bring down my 5. 25 goes into 185 now how many times? And based on our little multiplication table here, the closest number that I can use is going to be 25 times 7, because that's 175. 25 times 8 is too high, so I don't want that. Okay, so I'm going to write a 7 up here. 25 times 7 is 175. Now I'm going to subtract. 5 minus 5 is 0. 8 minus 7 is 1. And then 1 minus 1 is 0. 25 goes into 10 now how many times? It's too small, so now I'm going to add my decimal. I'm going to add my decimal here and a 0 and my decimal up here. I'm going to bring down my 0. So now I can divide. 25 goes into 100 how many times? 4 times right here. So 25 times 4, that's going to give me 100. And now I'm going to subtract. 100 minus 100 is 0. So your quotient is 17.4. 526 divided by 32. All right, I'm going to set up the problem. So 526 on the inside, 32 on the outside. So now my problem is set up. 32 goes into 5 how many times? It doesn't go, it's too small. So now let's do 32 goes into 52 now how many times? The closest number that I can use is 32 times 1. I can't do 32 times 2 because I got 64 and that's too high. So I'm going to put a 1 up here. 32 times 1 is 32. Now I'm going to subtract. 2 minus 2 is 0. 5 minus 3 is 2. Okay, now I'm going to bring down my 6. 32 goes into 206 now how many times? The closest number that I can use is 32 times 6, and that's 192. So I'm going to write a 6 up here. 32 times 6 is 192. Now I'm going to subtract. 6 minus 2 is 4. 20 minus 19 is 1. Now, if you need to leave your answer in remainder format, then you can stop here. So technically your answer would be 16 with a remainder 14. Okay, so one of your answers could be 16 with a remainder 14. You can't stop here if you're leaving it in remainder format. But for the sake of this video, we're writing our answers in decimal format. So I'm going to keep going until I get 0. Okay, so 32 does not go into 14. We know that. So I'm going to add a decimal and a 0. So I'm going to add my decimal here and a 0, and I'm adding my decimal on top here. Okay, so now I'm going to bring down my 0, bring it down here. So 32 goes into 140 how many times? The closest number that I can use is 32 times 4, that's 128. So I'm going to write a 4 on top here. 32 times 4, we said was 128. Now I'm going to subtract 140 minus 128. 0 minus 8, I can't do that. I need to borrow from the tens place. This 4 is going to become a 3. This 0 now will become a 10. So 10 minus 8 is 2. 3 minus 2 is 1. 140 minus 128 is 12. 32 goes into 12 how many times? I can't do that. It's too small. It doesn't go. So I'm going to add my 0, bring down another 0. 32 goes into 120 3 times. The closest number I can use is 3, and that's going to be 96. So I'm going to put, let's extend this. I'm going to put a 3 up here. 32 times 3 is 96. Now I'm going to subtract 120 minus 96. 0 minus 6, I can't do that. I'm going to borrow from the tens place. This 2 will become a 1. This 0 at the end in the ones place will now become a 10. So now you have 10 minus 6. That's going to give you 4. 1 minus 9. Oh, I can't do that. I'm going to borrow now from the hundreds place. This 1 is going to become a 0. This 1 on top here will now become an 11. So 11 minus 9 is going to be 2. And 0 minus 0, that's 0. So 120 minus 96 is 24. 32 goes into 24 how many times? It doesn't go. So I'm going to bring down another 0. 32 goes into 240 how many times? The closest number that I can choose is 32 times 7. That's 224. So I'm going to write a 7 on top here. 32 times 7 is 224. Now I'm going to subtract 240 minus 224. 0 minus 4, I can't do that. I need to subtract and borrow from the tens place. That 4 is going to become a 3. This 0 will become a 10. 10 minus 4 is 6. 3 minus 2 is 1. And then 2 minus 2 is 0. So 240 minus 224 is 16. 32 goes into 16 now. How many times? It doesn't go, it's too small. So I'm going to bring down another 0. 32 goes into 160 now. How many times? Uh-oh, yay, we found it. So 32 times 5 is 160. That's perfect. So I'm going to write a 5 up here. 32 times 5 is 160. 160 minus 160 is 0. So your decimal format is going to be 16.4375. That's your quotient. Remember, you can leave your answer in remainder format or decimal format. Let's try 756 divided by 15. Okay, let's set up the problem. So 756 on the inside, 15 on the outside. So we're going to ask ourselves, 15 goes into 7 how many times? It doesn't go, it's too small. So now let's try 15 goes into 75 now how many times? I can use 15 times 5. That's going to give me 75. So I'm going to write a 5 up here. 15 times 5 is 75. Now I'm going to subtract. 75 minus 75 is going to give me 0. Now I'm going to bring down 6. 15 goes into 6 how many times? 0 times. It's too small. I'm going to write a 0 on top. 15 times 0 is 0. Now I'm going to subtract. 6 minus 0 is 6. And then 0 minus 0 is 0. Okay? I use all my numbers in my dividend, so I have nothing left. Your answer would be 50 with a remainder 6 if you need to leave your answer in remainder format. Okay, but I'm going to go ahead and keep going and leaving my answer in decimal format. Since we already know 15 does not go into 6, I'm going to go ahead and add my decimal and my 0. Okay, I'm going to bring down my 0. 15 goes into 60 how many times? And that's going to be 4 times. 15 times 4, that's 60. So I'm going to write a 4 up here. 15 times 4 is 60. 60 minus 60 is 0. So your decimal format is 50.4. Okay? And then your remainder format is 50 with a remainder 6. And this is your quotient. All right, guys? So that's all we have for today. And I will see you all in the next video. Bye, guys.